Fear Zone Channel. A couple spent the greatest terror with a creature that came to get something in their house, but someone who knew the spiritual world came into this story to help solve this macabre problem. Hello everybody, and today's report is from Mr. Paulo, and this happened to him in the city of Caetite, which is in the state of Bahia, and at that time, in the year 2000, Mr. Paulo was 26 years old. And it all started like this. In the place where I lived, it was a rural village, and the houses were about 50 meters from each other, and in this place, almost all the residents had their animals for breeding, like chickens and ducks, or small vegetable and fruit plantations in the backyard of their own houses. At one time my wife was pregnant, and as time passed my son was born. I was very happy, because this was my first child. After about 6 months, a strange thing happened, because one of my villagers, who was a man and husband of a neighborhood which, came to my house to talk to me, and what this man asked me was if my newborn son had been baptized, and I said no. And so, this man ended up telling me something that I didn't expect. And he opened the game with me, that his wife was a witch. She said that something would come to visit our neighborhood any night, and that it was an evil that could come either in physical form or in spiritual form. Well, I was surprised by this conversation, because the husband of this witch was serious, and this man told me further that his wife predicted that a creature would come to our village, and that the witch, who was his wife, had left several bags of salt scattered in the forest, and right in front of his house, so that this evil would take the salt and go away. But what happened was that the cursed creature, she said, came to the neighborhood in human form, but didn't take any bags of salt. The neighborhood which said that some kind of spiritual agreement was broken, and she didn't know the consequences of that. So she thought of my son, that maybe the creature was after my baby, because my son wasn't baptized. Of course I was worried, and the Lord even gave me a little bag of salt, told me that if someone comes to the door asking for salt, you give him the salt, and if no one comes to get it, you keep watching your house, with a gun, every night, and after this warning, this man left my house. I was scared by what this man told me, that someone was trying to steal my baby, so I started sleeping late to protect my baby, and after that I even left the little bag of salt at the entrance of the house, but no one came to get it. One certain night, when I was home, I went to prepare a juice to drink, because it was very hot that day. Suddenly I heard my dog barking. I looked out the window to see what was going on. I looked everywhere and saw nothing. After that I went back to finish my juice. After a while, I was very sleepy, and I slept in the living room, but after a while my wife came to wake me up, and she was very scared, and she signaled me not to make any noise, and told me to get the shotgun. Although I didn't know very well what was going on, I took the gun, and also, I went to look out the kitchen window, to get a better look, because my wife said that there was something trying to open our bedroom window, where our son was also sleeping with us, but she didn't know what it was. As soon as I opened the kitchen window, and looked out of my house, I couldn't believe my eyes, because there was a creature there, looking into my bedroom window, and it had its hands clutched to the window flaps, and without making a sound, but trying to open it. I was terrified, because it was some kind of animal that stood up like a man, and after it fell on me, I thought that this creature was a werewolf, because it had a snout like a dog, and big ears, and its body had a dark fur, and its teeth came out of its mouth. At this, I noticed that the creature started sniffing the air, and soon turned toward the kitchen window, where I was looking. This creature closed his face in anger at me, and he came walking upright, as if he were a person in my direction. At that moment, I didn't even think, because the shotgun was in my hands. I already put the gun out the window. The creature saw that action of mine and tried to dodge, but I shot it and got the werewolf's shoulder. He fell to the ground half rolling. I shot the werewolf again in the back, and the beast ran off half limp on 4 legs, and smartly it went behind my house. My dog barked at it. At that moment, I reloaded my rifle again, and stood at the window looking out the back of the house, because I was afraid that the werewolf might come back and try to get my son. After a while, I saw some noises through the woods behind my house, and they were some moans mixed with growls. After a few minutes, I didn't see or hear anything else, and even so, I kept watch looking through the windows of my house to see if that creature was still around. The impressive thing is that after an hour or so, a police car appeared in front of my house, and the 2 officers came to talk to me about what was happening. So I went outside with my wife and identified myself, and I learned that the police came because of a complaint that they heard several shots inside my residence, and of course, I explained what happened to the military about the creatures that invaded my house. These officers did not pay much attention to what I said, and they went to search the vacant lot next to my house. I started to hear them talking to each other and deciding what they were going to do, but then I saw another big car coming by the place. The fact is, I saw them leaving the place with the creature inside a black bag, but they didn't talk to me anymore about what they thought about the animal, and they didn't even order a police report, and they didn't call me at the police station, and for me, it was fine, because for sure that creature was dead, or almost dead, and the cops all left. After a few months, I still kept thinking about this creature, and for sure, the cops took away the body of the animal to hide the evidence from people. But also, I went to the witch to find out more details about this werewolf and what I could do so that another of these creatures wouldn't come after my baby. Then the witch told me that in my case, I had to baptize my baby urgently, otherwise, for sure, other of these creatures would come, or even worse, to haunt me. After this conversation with the witch, I ended up leaving my son and my wife at her cousin's house until the day of my son's baptism, and even then, to this day, I stay alert with these creatures, because one never knows who these werewolves are, and imagine if this creature managed to get hold of my baby. Anyway, thank goodness the witch warned me about this story, and with that, I prepared myself to protect my family. If you like the story, subscribe and leave your like. Canal, Fear Zone, your terror channel. Good evening to all, and now, let's go to today's account, which is from Mr. Gilson, and this happened to him in the city of Araras, which is in the state of Sao Paulo, and by that time it was in the year 2013, Mr. Gilson was 42 years old. And today, I'm going to report something mysterious and terrifying, in which I lived, when a creature appeared several times to me, and my family also went through trouble with this beast. And the story, it begins like this. At that time I lived with my wife and my son, in a junkyard, where I also worked in copper and irons, which the wanderers brought every day, and I gave money to them. And also in this junkyard, I raised many chickens, which were loose, walking on the floor of the company. But one night, I was doing a round by the junkyard, and then I went to the company gate, and I got out of the company and I stood on the sidewalk, and I lit a cigarette. I was on the street and started smoking. After I finished smoking, I saw a man coming out of the woods, all scared, but I recognized him. He was one of the people who always came to sell copper and iron in my company. I was worried about this wanderer, so I called him to see what was happening, because he looked through the woods, afraid of something, but so that this guy began to walk towards me. A huge animal appeared in the street, and by the kind of beast, was a dangerous animal. I was amazed at the size of it. I told my friend to run fast to me, and he did it, but the creature also started running after him. I saw that the beast could reach him. I took a stick on the ground, and I threw at that beast, and I hit him, and this creature lost the direction of the chase, and he stopped running with the blow I hit him. We took this time, and my friend came along with me in my junkyard, and I closed the gate fast, so the beast would stop following us, but we were frightened by that strange creature from the street. I looked down the street through the hole in the gate, but the animal was gone. Maybe he would have entered the woods near my company street and disappeared. After this danger, which we escaped, I kept thinking that this creature was not a dog, and he was a strange and deformed animal, and that ran on 4 legs, but very crouched on the ground. After that scare we went through, I ended up taking by car this friend of mine that I saved to his house, which was in the center of the city, because I could not leave him prowling around my neighborhood, because there was a lot of wasteland everywhere, and this creature was still loose out there in the early hours. After I left this guy downtown, I took my way by car. I went back to my house. After a while, I arrived in the street of the junkyard, and to my surprise, I saw a figure of something like a man, but it was all hairy and had big ears. I stopped the car in the street to be sure of what I saw, but with the car light, it got scared and ran into the woods and disappeared, and I was undecided what was right, that strange figure, but I was frightened, for he was standing like a man. Soon after, I got into the junkyard. I kept the car, but I was still worried now, with that man with big ears and hairy who ran in the woods. The strange thing is that I had never seen these things before in my life. So to defend myself, I took my gun, which was a .22 revolver, and I was hiding inside the company and looking at a hole in the wall to see the movement of the street. After almost 10 minutes, I saw a creature walking on 4 legs in the thicket, and it was the same animal who ran after my friend. I soon thought that I had to put an end to this animal, because sometimes someone would always pass in the street of the junkyard in the early hours of the morning, and surely this beast could attack anyone to kill. I opened the company gate and went to the sidewalk quietly, but my dog washed, and that beast saw me, and this animal was almost 30 meters away, and he tried to crouch in the bush to hide, but it was too late, because I shot this beast, and the shot, I think he scratched the face of the beast, but the creature rolled on the ground. But then, to my astonishment, that creature rose, and now he stood only on 2 legs, as if he were a man, and I had no doubt that it was the same creature which I saw standing near the street, and by its appearance, this animal was a werewolf, for his eyes were lit like lights, and his ears were like that of a dog. In this moment of terror, I went back to the gate of the junkyard slowly, and pointing the gun toward this creature, and this beast walked slowly without taking my eyes off me. I arrived at the gate of the junkyard, and even scared, and with the ammunition in my revolver, I shot the werewolf, which made a scary growl, but I ran into the company and locked the gate. I looked through the hole in the wall, and I didn't see this creature anymore. At that moment, I stood there thinking about what I was going to do, and I didn't sleep anymore, and I stayed in the house pretty scared, but at least I had the gun. Well, spending almost an hour, I didn't see any more sign of this beast, whether he was around or not. Anyway, the day dawned, and I was still pretty scared about what happened, and I kept thinking about this werewolf that I saw standing like people, and he was the same beast who walked on 4 legs, like a dog. And even during the day, I didn't even want to go to the woods, try to find this animal, because it would be too dangerous. Turns out, I opened the junkyard this morning, and the people who brought the irons and cardboard were coming in for weighing. So I took advantage, and I was warning these people not to walk around the woods at night, because I had seen that huge beast. The fact is, the days have been going on, and I didn't see any more sign of that werewolf, in which I shot with my gun. And the people I talked to, no one saw such a creature either. But in that time, I always went by car to a bar in my neighborhood to drink a little at night, and there, I always talked about this werewolf, which I saw in the early hours. However, a strange guy who had a bandage on his face, which I had recently met by the bar, and his name was Ricardo, and he was not from the city. This man was very interested in my story, which I spent with the creature of the night. But it was that one day, I was coming back from the bar, very late at night, and I saw this Ricardo. That I had a bruised face, walking down the street, next to my junkyard. I passed by, and I left to my house, and I didn't give Ricardo a ride. After riding a little with the car, I ended up regretting it, and went after this guy, to warn him about such a creature, or even give him a ride, so this man not run the risk of being attacked by that werewolf. So I started riding with the car, the nearby roads, but I couldn't find Ricardo. Anyway, then, I was going back to the junkyard, and soon I got close to home. I realized that some figure hid behind the wall of the junkyard. I walked a little further with the car to see what it was, but as soon as I passed by the street, to my surprise, I saw again that creature the other day, and he was standing on only 2 legs, behind the wall of my junkyard. At the time I tried to turn the car to run over this beast, but he smartly crouched down and stood on 4 legs and ran pretty scared into the thicket. At that time I took advantage and kept my vehicle in the company. Soon I came into my house, but my wife and son were asleep. I took my gun and I kept an eye out. Sometimes I looked in the courtyard of the junkyard to see if the werewolf would be around, but I saw nothing. Well, the hours went by, and the werewolf didn't show up, but the question, after I saw this creature, I couldn't sleep till dawn. Soon arrived in the day, and I knowing that it was a werewolf, I went after a stronger weapon. And a man from the place sold me a shotgun that was to protect me better, because the werewolf had already appeared twice surrounding my house, and I felt in danger in that place with my family. So I also stopped going to the bar at night to stay in the junkyard with my wife and son. It happened that one day I was walking on the street of my neighborhood, and then I found that man who had a bruise on his face that was called Ricardo. Then I told him the case of the werewolf who appeared again surrounding my house, and that maybe this werewolf marked me to catch me anyway. And talk comes and conversation comes. This Ricardo gave me advice. He told me to put a bag of salt on the sidewalk of my house at night, so the werewolf would get this salt as if it were some kind of agreement or payment, and the creature would not come back to torment me. As soon as I finished the conversation with this man, I went back to my house, and I ended up doing it, and I left the salt in front of the house, as Ricardo taught me. After a few days, someone took the salt bag, but I didn't see who it was. It could be the creature or some man who turns this beast. But my son said he saw my new friend Ricardo picking up something in the junkyard, in front of the junkyard. I began to suspect that this Ricardo had some connection to the werewolf who tried to attack me, and maybe that wound to his face was the shot I shot in the face of the werewolf that morning. But several months went by, and the werewolf never showed up to torment me again. And the strange thing, too, is that this Ricardo disappeared from the city. But that day the werewolf showed up, Ricardo also walked near the junkyard that night, and because of that, I began to distrust him, that he turned into that werewolf. And he knew a lot about salt. Here in Brazil, there is the legend that if you give salt to the werewolf, the creature leaves you alone. Then you can draw your conclusions. Good guys, thanks for watching my video, and if you liked it, leave your like and subscribe to the channel until the next report.